this recent studies show that the insect population planet-wide is down as much as 70%. You can muck with the top of the food chain, but the closer you get to the bottom of the food chain, the more dangerous the damage is that you're doing. Right. So if you look at the phytoplankton in the ocean, you look at the insect populations worldwide, we need major shifts. And the five systems that I'm talking about, it's the rules of the economic system. The energy system is really two systems. So it's the energy consumption system and the energy production system. They have to change. And then the agricultural system has to change. And the last one is the protection of the web of life, our relationship to the rest of the creatures on planet.
Hi, welcome to Code Green, conversations for a future we want and our kids deserve. I am very pleased to introduce a longtime friend, someone I always call the activist, Randy Hayes, who has done so much it's hard to fit it all in and still have time to do the interview. So I'll cut to the chase. He's a author. He started Rainforest Action Network and not just started it, he put it on the map, rolled down a lot of big banners on Home Depot. That's how I always picture you, Randy. And he has, in the last few years, started a very interesting and compelling project, Foundation Earth. We're going to hear all about that. But that's what I call you. I like what Wall Street Journal called you, and that is, and it's so perfect, the pit bull of the environment. Randy,
Yes, well,
I've seen you in action. It is true, true, true. So without further delay, welcome. It's great to have you on. In all seriousness, when you pitched me, hey, I want to talk about this, and I was thinking about getting back with my interviews series, and I said, I can't not report this. And you're really one of my inspirations for getting back on this because, as you know, it's been a long, challenging struggle and was writing my book. And then I had a granddaughter, Trump 2.0, went to Antarctica in December, LA fires, said, I got to do it. So thanks for being with me and our viewers. And how are you doing in this
but
moment of
you're
challenge?
even more motivated now because of the upcoming generations that need a world to live in and deserve to have a world to live in.
Well, no kidding. I've said this
Yeah.
before, but I started this when my daughter turned 2. She'll
Yeah.
be 31 in November, and my granddaughter will be 2 in November. So yeah, that's how long, 28 years and
Yeah.
change. And you've been
And
at
it's
it
not
even
just
longer.
future generations of our human species, but future generations of all species, all of the fellow creatures we share this world with.
And it's not just future generations. Look what just happened in Florida, in LA, you name it. And it's here across the country, across the globe. It's arrived faster than scientists ever predicted, more furious, more ferocious, more frequent, all those F words and more.
Yeah.
Then we have another F word to contend with in DC, where you have spent, I guess, the last 10, 15 years working, and now you're back in the Bay Area. So am I. Welcome back. Okay, without further ado, tell us about Foundation Earth. It really sounds compelling. A roadmap, let's say a roadmap for an ecological civilization. Want to know if that's even possible at this late stage. You must believe so, or you wouldn't be doing this. An ecologically sustainable economy. How is that possible? Rethinking society from the ground up. Okay, take it away. Tell us about all of this and more.
I suppose on a deeper, deeply honest level, I think of the building of an ecological civilization really as a plan post-collapse. How do we rebuild post-collapse? People rebuild with what they know, but the old paradigm of industrial civilization is what is bringing about the cascading set of collapses that people planet-wide are feeling more and more with each subsequent year. And so I like what David Suzuki said about, is it too late? And he said, essentially, we humans aren't smart enough to know if it's too late, right? So you need to have a plan commensurate with the scale of the problem and the timing of the problem. And increasingly, as I'm sure your audience knows, it's feeling not just 11th hour, but some would say it's past 12 o'clock midnight, meaning in some respects it may be too late. If you look at the thermal gradients in the world's oceans, that much embodied heat and acidity from 200 years of industrial revolution and abuse of the planet, may be past the tipping point, but we don't really know yet. at any rate, whatever pockets of civilization survive, we want them to be able to rebuild in dignified, low impact lifestyles and carry on and allow for the rewilding and repair of the living systems of the planet. So
Sounds
that's where I'm
great.
at.
How do we do it?
Well, we can all talk about kind of systems thinking and systems change, but the first question to ask yourself is, well, what system do you want to change? Do you want to change the governance system, the educational system, the energy system, the agricultural system? Well, if you look at all of those major societal systems, I've narrowed it down to five that seem really quite critical because each of those five systems, if properly corrected, would absolutely reduce major pressure on what we call climate change, which is really climate disruption and climate, shredding, turning the blue sky into a toxic furnace, right? That's a better image for that
Brownish
problem.
orange in color.
But
Yeah.
also, all five of the systems that I'm targeting would help protect the biological diversity on planet Earth that we absolutely require for humanity. There is no humanity on a near dead planet. And most of your audience, some of your audience will know that this recent studies show that the insect population planet wide is down as much as 70%. Well, you can muck with the top of the food chain, but the closer you get to the bottom of the food chain, the more dangerous the damage is that you're doing, right? So if you look at the phytoplankton in the ocean, you look at the insect populations worldwide, we need major shifts. And the five systems that I'm talking about it's the rules of the economic system. The energy system is really two systems. So it's the energy consumption system and the energy production system. They have to change. And then the agricultural system has to change. And the last one is the protection of the web of life, our relationship to the rest of the creatures on planet. So to go back and give a little more detail there with the rules of the economic system, the low-hanging fruit would be societal campaigns, say in the 20 biggest economies, the G20, to cut public subsidies to all extractive industries. If you want to look at what damages nature and the living systems of planet Earth, it's primarily extractive industries. That's not just hard rock mining, you know, that's oil and gas mining, that's old growth logging and logging of any natural forest, but it's also overfishing and it's also the destruction of the soils. That's all extractive industry activity. And public subsidies going to those giant corporations doing that is essentially corporate welfare. Most of those industries would not be profitable without public subsidies. So our tax should not fund the destruction of the earth, plain and simple. Getting rid of public subsidies was a major change in the rules of the economy. And then the second one is the energy consumption system. We need to cut our overall energy use globally in half, not allow AI to expand it to be double what it is right now, right? This is an emergency. If that's unacceptable. And most of the energy advocates around the world for renewable energy, good for them that they're championing it. But if you continue to expand the energy pie, you'll never get to 100% renewable energy, right? So, cut it off right now and reduce down. We've got to quit producing stupid stuff that ends up in landfills, right? That's a lot of energy use. That's a lot of extractive industry activity. So, cut the subsidies to extractive industries, reduce overall energy. The third system is energy production. Of course, we want 100% renewable energy. We all know that. The fourth one is maybe the most important, and that's the end of industrial agriculture and the conversion to ecological farming globally. The number one cause of the loss of biological diversity is agriculture. Most tree-hugging organizations, including in the old days when I ran Rainforest Action Network, we weren't really fighting agriculture. We were fighting logging. We were fighting oil and gas extraction from the Amazon. We were fighting a lot of things that had to be fought.
And you had a
We
lot of victories, I will say.
and we probably had more victories than many during that era. Stopping Burger King from using rainforest beef, that took us 18 months. Stopping Home Depot, the largest retailer of wood on planet Earth, from selling mahogany stolen from native reservations, indigenous reservations, and lands, ancestral lands from the Amazon. That took 18 months. Stopping Citibank, from funding illegal logging in Southeast Asia, stopping the World Bank from building hydroelectric dams in the Amazon. Those were pretty major victories for that era. And heroic as they were insufficient, right? We haven't orchestrated that societal U-turn to a better world, right? And so that's what these five systems change that I just laid out could symbolize. Now, in order to make that kind of a campaign happen, you need a massive public relations campaign funded, in the tens of millions of dollars per continent globally for many years. The initial budget that I put together for this campaign for the first 3 years was $32 million, and that was just to get started. That kind of money's sloshing around, but you got to have a serious campaign plan, business plan, and partners to access that kind of money, right? And so that's what I'm going to UN Climate Week soon here in 2025 to meet with potential partners on that kind of a campaign.
And me too. I'll be asking for support for independent public green media, to really connect the dots that mainstream media has pretty much failed to do. How big of an issue do you think the lack of eco-literacy or education of the public has been in some of the obstacles that we've seen?
Well, all in all, mainstream media is starting to get outmaneuvered by false media,
Oh, not this is not a new development for
misinformation,
20
right?
years. Fox
And
and
then
disinformation.
there's independent indie media, which is, the kind of work that you do. That's where the ecological truth is best told. But we have to help indie media really scale up and reach the audiences, with the constant drumbeat of not only just the analysis of why we got into this problem, but the solution steps, the roadmaps to get out of the problem and get to a better world, right? And that's why the bulk of the money that I want to raise over the next few years would actually go to the media. It would be distributed to the media for the campaigns.
Really, and when I say that, and I say it frequently, because no one, all these smart people, these investors, these tech investors, and been covering that whole movement for decades,
Yeah.
and these smart philanthropists, people of wealth and success, they don't seem to get that if we don't bring the public along, we can't win on any of these fronts. And I feel like a broken record, remember
Yeah.
records? But I stand by it because there's still so little of us doing this relatively, and there's like zero support. And I'm not even just saying that from firsthand experience, which is extensive, deep and wide, but there's now research that shows that it's a terribly underfunded area.
Right. Herb Gunther used to run the Public Media Center
Oh
out of
yeah,
San
don't be
Francisco.
fueled. He ran our Don't Be Fueled Mothers for Clean and Safe Vehicles campaign.
Yeah.
And whenever that was, 2002.
He was just one of my chief advisors, and he said, Randy, there is no serious environmental campaign without a media campaign attached to it.
He also said there is no greater clout than mothers because we were moms for, Mothers Against Gas Guzzling, MAG.
Yeah, there's a campaign called Mother Love brewing out of London that's meant to go global. And I think in many respects, we're gonna see a lot more of that energy
Mhm.
over the next few years because we still live in a largely patriarchal society, and the powers that be, it from the top down, be it the captains of industry or the elected officials, you know, they uh, don't seem to be able to shift to telling the ecological truth the way women can. And if we see around the world, really in the last 10 years, most of the major marches are led by women. Certainly down in the Amazon, amongst a lot of the Amazonian tribes. It's the women leadership that are championing the march.
Something else I've been saying, let's give women a chance. Men have done some good, but look what they've wrought, mostly they, because it is, as you say, still men running, countries, companies, corporations, starting wars, the
Yeah.
killing machines. Just give us 10 years, see what we can do. So you're talking my language, Randy. How do we go from these very important insights that you're sharing to reality? And do protests matter? There's
Yeah.
been quite a few regularly, certainly here in
Well,
Marin
in some
County.
respects, it's already happening because if you look at each of those five areas, there's no major global campaign around subsidy reduction to extractive industries. There are some groups focused on that. Uh, there isn't an actual roadmap written for that campaign to be at the proper level of global scale. But I think the time has come for that campaign. It's not a new idea. We know that corporate socialism is what subsidies and public welfare to these companies is really all about. We've known that for many decades, but I think the time has come now where the public can be rallied to pressure the nation states, say in the G20, the 20 largest economies, to begin to reduce dramatically. If you imagine 10% a year, then in 10 years, in one decade, you have a 100% solution to that aspect of the problem, right? And so um, I'm looking at, in terms of how to making this campaign happen, you need the grassroots campaigning on the ground, the kind of stuff that Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth International and Rainforest Action Network did. You need that happening, say, in these G20 economies, but you also need the top-down work. There are power brokers at the top, some of them elected officials, even a few of them captains of industry, that can pressure from that respect. And I've been in dialogue with the Club of Rome and people there who have access from that top-down perspective and are focused on it with some minimal results. Even the Donut Economics, for your listeners who know that economic sort of book and approach to an ecological economics, um, that's catching on in certain countries now in the European Union and here and there in Africa. So that top-down stuff with the bottom-up works. But we also need our lawyers. We need major lawsuits against the 50 to 100 largest polluters on planet Earth. And the head of Friends of the Earth, Netherlands, it's a group called Milieu Defense. They had a major lawsuit against Shell Oil, which they initially won, uh, and to force Shell Oil to come into compliance with the Paris Climate Accords, right? Then it changed a bit in an appeals court, but that's not over. At any rate, they've thought out how do we go after the 50 to 100 largest polluters with these major lawsuits, right? So if you've got the bottom-up pressure, you've got the top-down pressure, you got the lawsuits, and then you surround all of that with this massive media campaign, which has been very well thought out by this woman, Frankie Oliver, out of London, who's championing this mother love approach. Um, uh, then you've got, I think, a winning combination.
I'd love to meet her. If she's at Climate Week, introduce me.
She won't be at Climate Week this year,
Okay.
but we'll connect you up.
Okay, you touched on so many things. I could go in about five, maybe 10 directions, but I want to make sure I've given you a chance to fully download what Foundation Earth is working on before I ask you a couple of follow-up questions.
Well, we're doing a number of different things. We've over the years we've had a small grants fund uh, for the American Southeast, say from Florida to Maryland, which is often ignored by the environmental movement. And so Brent Blackwelder, who used to run Friends of the Earth US, he and I managed that for a number of years. We're also working with the tribe and $1 million grant out of Virginia to essentially buy up lands between state parks and major private land holdings to create wildlife corridors. And They're also building longhouses and reinstituting the tribal ceremonies. So there's a number of things that we're doing. Our biggest campaign, of course, are these five systems change, this great societal U-turn to an ecological civilization. But I went back down to the Southwest near the Grand Canyon 3 times last year to meet up with the Hopi elders. And the Hopi tribe is one of the Pueblo tribes, perhaps the oldest one in the Western Hemisphere, actually. Um, and they have a lot of understanding about the ways of nature, right? And the elders, where Foundation Earth is assisting a little bit with meetings between the elders throughout North America to get together and compare notes of their understanding of nature's needs,
Mhm.
right? And so we also worked for a couple of years, and I chaired the steering committee for a group called Nature Needs Half.
Yes.
And that's about some of your listeners know the 30 by 30 campaign, which is to protect 30% of the oceans and lands by the year 2030. Right now, about 18% of the lands on planet Earth and 8% of the oceans are protected, but that needs to get up to 30% in a matter of 5 years. That's ambitious, but it's really caught on, including with nation state governments. There's something called the High Ambition Coalition.
Hmm.
And this is a coalition of nation state governments. It was started by Costa Rica, France, and the UK, but now I think there are 60 governments. There are about 200 governments globally, but about 67 governments are now members of the High Ambition Coalition, which are going to achieve 30% protection of their territories by 2030.
I would
And
imagine some of those are island nations facing destruction as the sun
yes,
goes by.
yes, but also a number of African nations, a number of European nations. The Biden administration joined it. Of course, the Trump administration is not in that league, uh, but we'll
That's
see
put
how that
mildly.
pans out over the next few years.
Okay, so we've gone 20 minutes, I think, before mentioning the T word. How deadly and destructive and damaging and depressing are all these rollbacks going to be for the efforts you're talking about?
Well, first of all, they're not surprising. They're deeply tragic and disappointing. But we've been on a downward spiral probably since around 1967. Some people would say 1972. That's really when, um, in a sense, the price of a loaf of bread became harder to buy versus easier. In other words, progress from World War II up to that time period, it it was easier to buy a loaf of bread, and then it's now uh, uh, spiraling down. So yes, we're spiraling down, and and with this last election, we've taken a major downturn. Will that open enough people's eyes to recognize that the solution is not going back to business as usual? Business as usual was taking us to the death of a livable planet. What we really need is a transformation of people's worldview from human supremacy that ignores nature to a nature-centric worldview or mindset or philosophy that realizes, you know, there is no vibrant human community without a vibrant planet, right? And that sort of lifestyle slash worldview transformation is really the deeper work of Foundation Earth.
I talk about this a lot, but I don't think it is a generally talked about enough. The disinformation campaign, of course, funded largely by the fossil fuel industry, but perpetuated, amplified, scaled up by Fox and Newsmax, I guess. They are continuing to lie about climate change. I don't know how they get away with that since they've had a few lawsuits on other issues, this one being the most important. When you see half the country not understanding the threats that we're facing, and climate, of course, is the mother of all of our eco challenges, making everything worse, but it's not the only one for sure. How angry does that make you? I think we should have a lawsuit, public interest lawsuit, saying that, perhaps people who watch Fox didn't understand the consequences and perhaps did not take proper precautions when yet another hurricane or tornado or flood was fire heading their way. because they lived through them before. But this is, different, right? A new era. But if people don't think climate change is real, it's a hoax, that does impact consequences, doesn't it?
Anger is not an inappropriate response to the death of a livable planet,
Not to
and
mention the death of children in Texas at camp. I keep bringing that one up too, but that is just the latest. That is just
now that's an example of the
heartbreaking.
cascading levels of collapse.
That's right.
That extreme weather event down there that caused the death of so many of those children in Texas when they're simply, celebrating life at a summer camp, right?
7-year-olds, 8-year-olds,
Uh,
and adults too. A lot of people died.
I mean, what's happening is that we call them extreme weather events, like Category 5 hurricanes like Katrina and Sandy. And years ago, I thought that the expression of those extreme weather events might create the political context for the level of change that we require. It hasn't, right? And so increasingly, the biosphere, the way it functions, is getting spastic. The jet streams are dropping, the oceans are rising. You know, uh,
That vortex when it gets
I'm
really
sure
cold,
the
colder
bulk
than
of
it
your
should be.
listeners know the basics here, right? And so it's an ecospasm. What happened in Texas is it's an ecological spasm of the biosphere, right? And they're getting worse and worse and worse, whether it's droughts in one region or floods in another region or supreme, heat waves or you know,
Even a freeze in Texas, unprecedented. We would.
exactly, exactly. So a spastic planet is not the kind of planet we want. We've had, tens of thousands of years really of a relatively stable climate on planet Earth called the Holocene. And we can get back to that, but only if we make major changes in human society and our economic system and all these other systems that I laid out. And all that does, these five systems, that just buys us time for the other things that I've not listed that also need to be done,
Go ahead.
in terms of the governance system and the educational system and so forth.
There are many groups working on similar issues. I mean, they're all the same issues we're all facing. You have so much accumulated knowledge and connections, your contacts. It's really gratifying to see that you've poured it into something with a great name, Foundation Earth, right? Um, our home. You said you mentioned you're working with Club of Rome. I'm sure you're working with others. Is this being kind of accepted as a good model to put at the top of that tree of efforts, or is this just one of many? Ego aside.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, the meeting that I'm going to have at UN Climate Week in 25 is really about four different similar efforts that are all happening.
Mhm.
And
Must be a good idea if it's all percolating at once, right?
Yeah, so there are things going on in Europe that aren't going on over here. Out of the state of California, there's a group from Claremont College. Actually, it might have even started in San Diego, but it's now being headed up out of Berkeley. It's called Ecological Civilization, right? And there's a book by that title, and they've got a brilliant sort of plan.
Mm.
And then the group One Earth has very similar thinking to the five systems change that I've laid out on the table. And Justin Winters, who runs that, she'll be meeting with us out at Climate Week, and so these different, quite similar efforts. We're all going to get together and compare notes and make sure we understand what each other's doing and figure out how to better support each other so that it is better positioned to grow to the scale that's needed.
If they'd like a representative from media, formerly corporate, now independent, I've got some ideas about what's wrong and what can be improved. Seriously, it's not about me. It's about, we got to make so much progress so quickly. We've got to go when they go low, we got to get loud and we got to get louder. A couple of follow-up questions. We just have a few more minutes, but you talked about stupid stuff. Give us some examples of what you consider stupid stuff we should stop
I'd
buying.
say my favorite example would be plastic toys made in China.
That's
First,
exactly what I pictured.
and so, what is plastic, right? For the most part, it doesn't have to. The word plastique is French and it means malleable, right? But plastic is. I asked years ago. I asked probably 1,000 people over about 5 years. What is plastic made of? And back then,
Nobody knew.
people did not know. It's fossil fuels, people. It's made out of
Oh,
fossil. It
yeah,
doesn't have to be,
petroleum,
but it is.
petroleum jelly, that Vaseline I put on my lips all
Yeah.
those. Who knew I was
Yes,
putting
right.
oil on my face?
At any rate, it could be, Saudi Arabian crude or Venezuelan crude or whatever, Nigerian crude oil shipped to China to make plastic toys, put in super tankers and sent to all the other continents of the planet. That would be, during an emergency, a very good example of stupid stuff.
Yeah.
But really, it's just not okay that we've become a throwaway culture. So any single-use plastic, be that plastic bags or forks or containers, or even just the plastic saran wrap on food packaging at the grocery store. I know there are many campaigns addressing that. We've got to give them the sort of ground support and the media support to become successful. Right now, the planet is trying to negotiate a plastics treaty and a better ocean treaty, right? And it's not going well, and we all know why, right? Because the captains of industry and their well-paid lobbying force are in there, and they've bought off so many of the elected officials that we don't really have a true democracy in most of these democratic countries.
How do you deal with the daily onslaughts by this administration? Like I wake up, look at my phone, and the juxtaposition of the latest, extreme weather event, not so unusual anymore, and the latest extreme rollbacks by the Trump administration. It's hard to do all that, and I haven't even gotten out of bed yet. How long have you been at this, by the way? Must be longer than that. I've known about you the whole time.
Well, I was born in 1950, so in this glorious year of 2025, I am now 75. So I,
Oh,
I tell people I'm closing in on 80.
and I
I'm
just turned
closing in on
70.
80, but
I just
there's no
turned
shortage of
70.
energy. There's no shortage of ideas. I moved from Washington, D.C. before the recent presidential election. I made that decision before that election.
Mhm.
And I came back to Northern California because my Rolodex is just a lot deeper here, and it allows me to jump into this campaign, which is quite a bit bigger of an idea than even Rainforest Action Network, which I started in 1985 along with Mike Rozelle, right, and people like Herb Gunther and others, Catherine Caulfield. Um, but uh, we've got to have plans commensurate with the scale of the problem. We've got to put forth a positive vision of a better world, an ecological civilization. But we also have to clarify what's the roadmap to get us there. And the roadmap that I've laid on the table today are these 5 system changes. It doesn't cover everything that needs to be done, but it's a damn good start. We may be able to avoid that kind of major sense of collapse, uh, or things will get a lot worse, but there will be pockets of civilization that make it through this crunch. And we want them to already know what, how to rebuild in an ecological paradigm with this ecological ground up swell of ecological living that's dignified living for all people.
And for those of our viewers who I hope want to know more, where can they go for information and the details, which are, I'm sure, many?
Well, you just type in foundationearth.org and you'll find us. There is a group out of the UK with the same name that does some kind of certification of, I think, food systems. But we're the Foundation Earth based out of Washington, D.C. and San Francisco.
Mhm. Well, great to have you back in the Bay Area. I'm newly back as well. This is where so much of it has happened. Easy to do programs out of here because just the people in our, 10-mile radius have been so many of the guests on my program. Thank you, Randy. I want to encourage our viewers to please like this. If you found this enlightening, I did. I know so much and I always learn more from my guests. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Betsy Rosenberg Interviews, Code Green, to really reach critical mass so we can turn this critical mess into critical mass. Thanks, Randy.
Your insight and dedication is much appreciated. Thank you.
Likewise. See you in New York. Safe travels.